Hello, welcome one and all. It's so good to see you all. We are wrapping up tonight our 2025 Summer Scholar in Residence series with Dr. Craig Farmer of Milligan University. I'm Father Josh Stevens. If you're joining us online, we welcome you for the Episcopal Church of St. John in the Wilderness. We've been learning all about some of the great controversies of the church, and we've learned that the way we think about important things theologically is not by accident, and we are a part of a continuing conversation, a continuing argument, continuing struggle with how God is revealed to us in Scripture and sacrament and in the life of the church. Scripture, all of that. So we are going to wrap that up today with Dr. Craig Farmer. Before we invite him up, just a few reminders. We have this weekend some special events. Bishop Jose McLaughlin, our diocesan bishop, will be with us on Sunday at both services, and he'll also be in here for a Bishop's Forum, which is something that he really insists on doing, where he wants to spend time with the people that he serves. So he'll be here just for kind of conversation, Q&A, and at the 10 o'clock hour. So please come to one of the services and come for that. And then that evening on June 29th, we have the Feast of St. John, our concert at Hubba Hubba Smokehouse, and Rainbow Row really is hosting it because the Flat Rock Village Bakery is going to be open for pizza as well. And it starts at 6 o'clock. I'd get there at 5, bring a chair. And if it rains, we'll have it over here in the parish hall. And you can actually bring, if you want to get your food and then come over here and eat in this room, you could do that between 5 and 6. And then we'd get the music started at about 6 or a little bit after if it rains. But it's not going to rain. Yeah, that's right. Getting the rain out of the way. Okay, well, let's welcome back to the podium one last time Dr. Craig Farmer.
Well, some of you may remember that I didn't really have a set topic for tonight, and I asked for questions, what the medievals called for a quodlibetal session, whatever you like. And I got a number of emails from people, and it was good because it reminded me once again, hey, Craig, you don't know much about anything. I'm not the resident expert on so many things, but I really appreciated the questions. There was one question that came to me from your dear sister, Susan Rex, and I saw it first, and I thought, well, that's outside of my area. But for the last 2-3 days, I've been pondering her question, and it's kind of the thing that's going to get me started tonight. And I'm probably going to go all over the place. But her question was, how might the voices of the desert fathers and mothers contribute to our own understanding of Christian spirituality? It's a great question. When people start their response by saying, that's a great question, that's code for, I have no idea, give my brain a few seconds here to come up with something. So that was my first reaction. What a great question. But I actually think we have a lot to learn from the desert fathers and mothers. And if you're sitting there thinking, understandably, I don't know who they were. These are people from about the 3rd century through the 6th century, went out into the wilderness, the Egyptian desert, the deserts area of what we now call Syria and Lebanon, and lived, for the most part, kind of solitary lives of prayer, contemplation, devotion, and thousands of people went out, some to visit these people, to get their wisdom, It was, and the question why so many people did this, I don't really have time to get into that, but I would say that when we hear about them, I think probably one of our first responses in our mind might be, that is so weird. Why did they do that? But it's often in weirdness that we find wisdom. And sometimes when things are really different, we need to pay attention. So if you are interested in learning more about the Desert Fathers, the best I could do is really point you in the right direction. And I would point you to two people. First of all, I would point you to Thomas Merton. Some of you probably know that name. He was born in France, but he became an American, studied at Columbia, and his mother was a Quaker, and but he eventually migrated to the Catholic Church and became a Trappist monk at the monastery in Gethsemane. Have any of you been to Gethsemane? Yeah. I mean, Trappists, they're Benedictines, but they're hardcore Benedictines. I mean, they get up at 4 a.m. for their first round of prayers. I go to a monastery with liberal Benedictines. They get up at like 5:30 and say, thank you. But the Trappists, they come out of the Benedictine church. And of course, Merton has had a big influence on my life. I mean, I would recommend, if you have a chance before you die, to read the 7-story Mountain, which is his spiritual autobiography. Had a big influence on me. He actually died in Bangkok, Thailand. I don't know if you knew that. In 1968, like a freak accident, electrocuted in the shower or something. But I was thinking about that last night because our paths almost, it was in 1969-70 that I arrived in Bangkok, where I lived for the next 5 years as a 9-year-old boy. But we didn't connect. But I have a special place in my heart for Merton because of where his thought goes. But he is a great introduction to the Desert Fathers. He's got a book that came out in 1960. It's called The Wisdom of the Desert. And he translated all these things, and I would encourage you to take a look. It's been so long, I think it's in public domain, so you can get PDFs of it. You don't even have to fork over $5 to bookfinder.com. You can just read it online if you like to do that. But that little volume, his introduction is spectacular. And I just want to read you a couple snippets from that to kind of whet your appetite. What these fathers sought most of all was their own true self in Christ. And to do this, they had to reject completely the false, formal self fabricated under social compulsion in the world. They sought a way to God that was uncharted, and freely chosen. They represent a discovery of man at the term of an inner and spiritual journey that is far more crucial and infinitely more important than any journey to the moon. This was written in 1960, Apollo 11. What was that, 1969? So this was the big, we're going to the moon. What can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? Wow. Tremendous. Last night, I read I read through it again. I haven't read that volume in many years, and I'm grateful to Susan for making me go back into it. The other person I would recommend to you is an Anglican nun named Sister Benedicta Ward. She was born in some town in England. I think her mother, to Methodists. There are not that many Methodists in England anymore, but she was born to Methodist parents, but eventually found her way to the Catholic Church and not the Anglican Church, and became a nun in an Anglican religious order. What's it called? The Sisters of the Love of God. It's right on the outskirts of Oxford, where she taught undergraduates as well. She's an expert on medieval theology. She's an expert on the Desert Fathers and Mothers. She's an expert on the Venerable Bede. This is another thing that Susan's emailed to me. I really got into Sister Benedicta Ward. I was just reading all about her beautiful life because I am always looking for people who model a beautiful life, a good life, where they've given themselves to something truly good. When she publishes a volume very similar to Merton, it's called The Sayings of the Desert Fathers. And again, it's her translation, and she writes a beautiful little introduction. She says, I am not translating these people for you out of just sort of curiosity. I'm writing them to help you become a better person. Read her introduction. When she died just 2 years ago, at age 90, Rowan Williams wrote an obituary. Do you know Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury? And what did he say? I thought this was beautiful. One of Sister Benedicta's greatest gifts was to take you into the heart of an alien world and help you to see with other eyes. That's beautiful. And another thing, she apparently had a wonderful sense of humor. One of the things she was working on at the end of her life was relics. What relics? What kind of work were they doing for people in the medieval world? And someone asked her about that, and she said, let's see if I can find it. She said, I am pretty sure that I now know what they meant to medieval people. The problem is that I'm still not sure what they mean to me. I don't kiss bones. She apparently had a very charming wit about her. And one of the things I read from her, I got interested in her more than the Desert Fathers almost, is she said, asked about her work as a translator. I've done a lot of work as a translator in my life. She says, to undertake translation is in itself an act of charity. It's a way of offering treasure to others. Isn't that beautiful? So, but as I've said before, I'm a firm believer that to include the voices of the dead in our own conversations about the meaning of our lives, to ponder the most important questions, it's wonderful. It broadens us. It challenges us. And so I point you to Benedicta Ward and Thomas Merton. Now, I will say this, monks have taught me personally a lot of things about prayer, silence, stillness, stability. I wasn't planning on alliteration, but here we go. Slowness, deliberate living. Do we live deliberately? I don't know if you remember when you were in high school and your teacher made you read Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau, I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about Benedict Ward, the kind of life she lived. And Thoreau, in explaining why he went into the woods for a time, says this: I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discovered that I had not lived. You know, I bet I'm not the only person in this room that's gone through some rough periods in life. I went through a very dark period in my life where, casting lines out to try and catch a hold of something. Freaked out my wife. You need to go to the doctor. Okay. And of course, what do the doctors do with someone like that? Oh, you've got clinical depression. And what do doctors do, especially psychiatrists? They throw pills at you, right? Yeah. We can fix you, Craig. The problems with your neurotransmitters, dopamine levels, serotonin levels, blah, blah, blah. And so they threw lots of pills at me. But those neurotransmitters probably weren't working right. But I think there was something deeper going on in my life, and I found out from monastic literature that they had a name for it. They call it acedia, which is really hard to define, but the Desert Fathers talked about it, and the monks talk about it, and Thomas Aquinas talks about it. What is acedia? You will Google away and try to find a definition. One person I was reading called it, the monks called it the demon of the noontide, like from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's when it would afflict you. There was no time clock in it for me, but a feeling of giving up, resentment, self-hatred, a loss of spiritual energy. A lot of spiritual writers connect it to sloth, but it doesn't always manifest itself. I mean, you can be in acedia and be doing lots of stuff. It manifests itself in different ways. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you know how to spell it? We'll see if Father. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Is it acedia or acedia? I've always heard it as acedia. Yeah. But one of the things that the monks helped me to do was to learn how to pray again. Don't work so hard. They just gave me a prayer book. And they also modeled for me being comfortable in silence. What does the psalmist say? For God alone my soul waits in silence. Silence makes us uncomfortable. I also went to a college founded by the Society of Friends, also known as the Quakers. I learned a lot of things from the Quaker culture of Haverford College. I visited first and fifth day meeting. They don't use the pagan names for the week, like we do. We forget that Saturday is Saturn's day, and so the Quakers, they want to get rid of that. I learned a lot of things, but I also learned, I was amazed at how they could come together for church and just sit there in silence. And sometimes someone would say something, but church wasn't a failure if no one said anything. They would come together in silence, and that was remarkable to me as a 20-year-old myself. What is going on there? Another thing that had a big impact on me in this dark period when I began trying to find something to hold on to is a film. And it's actually a German film called Die große Stille, but it came to English audiences as Into Great Silence. 2005 it came out. That's just 20 years ago. What is it? It's a remarkable film by a German filmmaker who in 1984 wrote the abbot of a Carthusian monastery in France, the mother house of the Carthusians. Have you heard of the Carthusian? They're monks. They're not really in the Benedictine family, but they come from about the 11th century, and they're called Carthusian because they're in the Chartreuse Mountains in France. And for centuries, they've made a liquor, a Chartreuse liquor, and our color, Chartreuse, is because of the greenish color of the liqueur made by the monks at that monastery. You learn all sorts of things. There is only one Carthusian monastery in the United States. It's in Vermont. I was reading all about them too. But anyway, the film is remarkable because he wrote them in 1984 and said, could I come? I want to do a documentary on your lives. And the abbot said, maybe, but not now. We're not ready. 16 years later, the abbot wrote that filmmaker and said, we're ready if you're still interested. And he said, yeah, I am interested. And he went there and he lived with them for 2 years and took hundreds and hundreds of hours of film. And there's no narration. There are a couple of interviews at the end, but there's no music like affecting our emotions. You literally go into their world, into the silence of their world. And guess what? You hear things that you would otherwise never hear. You hear their sandals scuffling along as they go into the chapel to pray. You hear a water dripping. It heightens your senses in a way. But anyway, there's a lot of praying and chanting. And I was watching this in my dark mood, and my daughter came in. I think she was around 10 years old, and she said, Daddy, what is that? I said, oh, it's monks. She said, well, how come it's so quiet? I said, Jing Lin, that's their world. And she said, Daddy, that's not my world. And I said, yeah, you're right. That's not your world. It's not my world either. Why am I so intrigued by that? Who am I? What am I living for? What does a good life look like? Those are fundamental questions. And I think actually all those questions are kind of wrapped up in the great question in the book of Job. Where shall wisdom be found? Wisdom. Where shall wisdom be found? And Job says, and where is the place of understanding? Man does not know the way to it. Merton's volume is called The Wisdom of the Desert. We assume we know what wisdom is, but I want to circle back to that in a minute and talk a little bit about wisdom. I do want to make a confession to you, though, that I am increasingly finding it very difficult to get 20-year-old students to ponder basic questions like, who am I? What am I living for? And what does a good, beautiful life look like? Sometimes I have to kind of boil it down in a different way from that. What do you consider success, a successful life? To try to make them think about that. Because, I say, look, my time's about done. I've screwed up in so many ways, sold out so many ways. You have a chance to live better than me. Use your imagination. Don't just be swept along passively. And I'm saying that, pouring out my soul to them while they're tapping away on their phones. I can't penetrate it. It's not true. Some hear it, and they seek me out. But we have to talk sort of one-on-one about things. In our humanities course at Milligan, we have two places where we try to get students to ponder those things, and I want to present them to you. Now, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about them, but to encourage you to read them if you care to. One of those things is a book written by a French Catholic philosopher. He was not just a philosopher, he was a mathematician, engineer. I mean, he's a polymath. He can do everything. Anybody know who I'm talking about? Blaise Pascal, an amazing figure. And I don't have time to tell you everything about his life, but I will tell you he died young. He, like so many geniuses, like Mozart, they burned themselves out. He died young. But one of the things he left were these fragments, pieces of paper that people collected together. He never finished pulling it all together, and people gave it the title Pensée. We need Rosanna here to translate for us. Pensée, thoughts. That's the name of the book, Thoughts. And it's a beautiful book, and we have students read a section of it. And one of the reasons we do that is because Pascal seems to get us. He seems to understand what our problem is as modern human beings. And we have them read his thoughts on something that he calls divertissement, diversions. We might call it amusement or entertainment. But I like the word diversion because it suggests what Pascal is talking. What is a diversion? it literally is something that turns you. It diverts you from where you were headed, right? Uh, One of Pascal's famous sentences on the root cause of all our misery, human misery, he says this: all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Wow. I know lots of human beings, myself included, who complain, I'm too busy, I'm harried, I'm anxious, I got so much to do, I got to do this, got to do that, I got to grade the humanities exams. I wish I had some rest and leisure. And when I get rest and leisure, what do? Activity, let's go somewhere, let's do something. The idea that I would just stop and do nothing but be alone by myself is kind of horrifying to my students even more. Are you kidding me? And Pascal asks, why is that? Why can't we sit in quiet stillness with ourselves? And he says two things, really. He says we have this deep intuition that if we still ourselves in silence, we might hear from God. We might hear something about ourselves. And we don't want to hear it. And so we welcome noise, agitation, excitement, diversion of any kind. Please, 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 entertain me. Because we don't really, silence is horrifying. On the other hand, he says we have another deep instinct, a contrary instinct. We seem to know deep down that it's only in stillness and rest that we can find true happiness. So these two things are at war with each other. And so we keep ourselves full of noise, busy, and it's because it's our fascination with triviality, living on the surface of things. And so what happens? On our deathbeds, where did the time go? Diversions. I'm always diverting myself from what's really important. He's worth reading. And I've just touched on one aspect of his thought. Pascal's actually famous for, he's kind of a late contemporary of Descartes, and he wants basically against Descartes to say, look, we have other ways of knowing than with our mind. And this is from a mathematician, an engineer. There used to be a computer language named for Pascal, UCSD Pascal. I had to learn it in college. He's the inventor of the first calculator. It's not like he's there's laws about hydraulics named after Pascal. He's not anti-reason, but he says, look, there's another part of us that knows things. And what did he call it? The heart. What is it, French? Le coeur, yeah. Famous statement from Pascal, the heart has its reason, which reason knows nothing about. Yeah. So I hope I've whetted your appetite. The second, yeah, go ahead.
Just going to say it's interesting now that with smartphones and social media and everything that even non-religious people are starting to talk about how our attention is getting mined, and how companies are profiting and controlling our attention, and we're losing the ability to be deliberate with it,
Yeah.
from the formation we're getting with technology.
I do sense among the 20-year-olds that they think, I can't live without my phone, but by golly, when I have children, I'm not going to let them have a phone. Yeah. The second thing I want to point you to, put on your radar, Leo Tolstoy. And I know you're groaning. Don't tell me, Farmer, that I got to read War and Peace or Anna Karenina. I'm not telling you that. I am suggesting a much shorter work that you can read slowly in 2 hours. Also PDFable. It's called The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Have you heard of it? Have you read it? Yeah. I mean, one of the most, gosh, it's powerful. It's about this bourgeois, middle class, respectable person in St. Petersburg, Russia, who does all the right things, pleases his folks, goes to law school, works his way up the ranks, becomes a municipal judge. And it's all about like living life passively according to the expectations of everyone around him. And it's this really stupid freak accident. He's all obsessed about like how his parlor looks when guests come over for tea, and he's hanging curtains, and he has a little accident, injures himself, gets sick, and it becomes clear that he's dying. And he's mad about it. And let me just read you one thing he says. It comes at the very end. I mean, he's so hateful to everybody, and he's mad at God. And what does he say? Can it be that I have not lived as one ought? I've done everything as it should be done. I checked all the boxes. And he comes to see he hasn't ever lived life. That the only self he knows is the false self. And I don't want you to slit your wrists. It ends on a relatively positive note. He has a kind of epiphany at the end where for the first time in his life, he's not turned in on himself, but feels sorry for his son and puts his hand on his son's head and feels sorry for the suffering of his wife, who's suffering because he's dying, even though through the whole story he basically despises her. And he sees light. One of the plays, he says, it's as though I had been going steadily downhill while I imagined I was going up. In public opinion, I was moving uphill, but to the same extent, life was slipping away from me. It's all gone. All I can do is die. Yeah. 20-year-olds don't like to be reminded of their mortality, right? Yeah. Tolstoy. Or Ilyich. It's spelled in different ways. Ilyich. Ivan Ilyich. It's not even a novel. They call it a novella. It's a short. It's longer than a short story, but shorter than a novel. So, what is a life well lived? Back to wisdom. I think we find wisdom in lots of places. We find it in conversations with each other. But I also think that wisdom is often found in unexpected, strange places. I think I've mentioned to you that I've learned so much through my friendships and conversations with my Muslim friends in Johnson City. Yeah, I could talk for a whole hour about how I feel like having friendships with those people has made me a better human being, and not only that, made me a better disciple of Christ. And I, of course, have introduced to you all kinds of strange voices that maybe you have or maybe you haven't encountered, like Augustine, Pelagius, Thomas Aquinas, Martin Luther, the Anabaptists, and even weird groups like the Amish. The weirder the better, because where we see strangeness and weirdness, we should stop and say, wait a minute. Ask Job's question. Where shall wisdom be found? It's found, well, let me say this. I think the kind of wisdom that Christians should pursue is a very peculiar, strange sort of wisdom. That's why I think when we see the Amish in Lancaster County, or the Bruderhof, or Sunni or Sufi Muslims dancing in prayer, there's where we need to stop and say, wait a minute. What do I learn about myself? We're very quick to take what's different, strange, and say, ugh, stupid, label it, put it in a box. It makes it safe. A lot of wisdom is not threatening. It's intuitive. Think of Ben Franklin, right? Famous for all his proverbs. Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, right? A penny saved is there you go, haste makes. Yeah, we hear those pithy aphorisms and we think, yeah, that sums it up. That immediately and intuitively resonates. We think, yep, he sums it up really well there. And you don't have to be a Christ follower to recognize that kind of wisdom. That's not unique to us. And there's even some of that sort of wisdom in our scriptures. The book of James is kind of like that. The book of James has a warning about, he says something like, not many of you should become teachers because you will be held to a higher account. And I know that from experience. I know that as a teacher, from experience, my capacity to wound people with my words. I don't want to do that. I want to say things that might be helpful to people, but sometimes I fail and I hurt people. And I have to make amends for that. I've had to do that. I embarrassed you publicly in my class. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. So I understand the wisdom of James. It's not a peculiar wisdom, but I think the wisdom of Christ is somewhat odd. It's paradoxical, self-contradictory, even absurd. What do we hear from Jesus Christ? To be first, we must be last. Giving is receiving. Having nothing is possessing all things. We have to lose our lives in order to save them. If we want to be great, we must serve. If we want rest, we have to take a yoke on our shoulders, a burden. Think of the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard it said, that's the more intuitive wisdom, but I say unto you. You've heard it said, eye for an eye. I say turn the other cheek. It's not just loving your neighbor now, it's loving your enemy, praying for your enemy. That's counterintuitive wisdom. The poor are the ones who are truly blessed. The persecuted are those who inherit the kingdom of heaven. No wonder then that we sort of automatically and instinctively soften the sting of Jesus' teachings. If you want to follow me, you got to take up your cross. And so we turn cross-bearing into a more bearable metaphor of like putting up with small inconveniences. You know, my neighbor's dog barks all night long, but I don't want to confront them. That's my cross to bear. Or, you know, I guess for Lent, I'll give up coffee. That's my cross. I think we all know that that's not what Jesus is talking about. But let me say this. I do not think the Christian life is about suffering and pain as things to be celebrated. You know, we're just masochists. Bring it on. That's not what the Christian life is. We don't find ultimate pleasure in pain. In fact, as Christians, we are called to alleviate suffering. That's what Jesus did when he encountered it. We don't tell people who are suffering, be of good cheer, this is the cross that God wants you to bear. No. So we're not called, I think, to go looking for suffering and to embrace it happily. I mean, I think we can paradoxically experience joy even when we are suffering, but we don't need to seek it. I would suggest, and I hope I'm not verging on offending you, that when we truly follow Jesus, there are forces at work in the world that will bring suffering to us. It has a way of finding us. We don't have to go out and look for it. You know, we rightly celebrate the suffering, the courage of the ancient Christian martyrs, but I don't think we're supposed to go looking for it. Suffering, sickness, death, none of that is part of God's original plan for the world. God's original purpose was and still is shalom. We are created for loving relationship with God and with one another, and for the enjoyment of God's good creation. But we do live in a broken world. God's shalom, we see so little of it. And that's why we need each other. I think that's why I need the church. I mean, I have said from time to time what a painful exercise it is for me to go to my own church. But I continue to do it. And it's not because I'm trying to form my children. They're all gone. So it's just, I could stay home and do my crossword. But I keep thinking, no, I need to be transformed. I need to be shaped. And I cannot be trusted to actually know what is best for me. I need you. I need others as a part of my life that help me discern that. I don't trust myself to lead my own life and to make all my own decisions. The kind of wisdom we Christians embrace should, at least from time to time, make us seem weird or foolish. What does the Apostle Paul say? The Jews request a sign, the Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. To the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness, but to those who are called, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, because the foolishness of God, and that's what it looks like to us, is wiser than men. We worship a God who emptied himself, who made himself known in the self-emptying Christ. And when we gather to worship, when we come together, we're being recreated, refashioned with a new, true self, instead of the false self that it's easier somehow to live with. What does Paul say to the Ephesian church? Put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life. Be renewed in the spirit of your minds. Put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. God is sometimes found not in noise, not in hustle and bustle and activity, not in studying theology, but in stilling ourselves. You heard this text just last week. After the earthquake, the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire, the sound of a low whisper. Elijah heard it. He went to the entrance of the cave, and behold, a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" We need to open ourselves to the possibility of hearing God's voice in our lives. I need that, at least. I don't know about you. And the tradition of spirituality that is in the monastic tradition has enriched me. It's enriched me simply by being connected to some brothers at St. Meinrad Archabbey and St. Meinrad, Indiana. And they have helped me. They have helped me be who I'm supposed to be, a better version of me. If I'm left to my own devices, woe is me. I need you. I need others. I need help. I need the voices of our rich tradition. I guess this turned into a sermon, didn't it? Sorry, you came for a lecture. It was my last talk. I may croak on the way home, and I want to make sure I said something.
Can we do a few questions?
Oh, yeah, okay. We can do a few questions, if you'll answer them.
Okay. Is there an amen out there? Amen. Okay. Very good. That's a lot to think about for today, and you've heard some other really neat journeys into some thoughts. But what questions do you all have in the last couple minutes? We can pass the mic around.
I think he summed it up.
Yeah.
I think that's what this church is all about.
Yeah, I agree. And even the Desert Fathers and Mothers were all about love. And people have noted, Merton notes this, they're not theologians. They're not that interested in like working out how the Trinitarian economy works. No, they want to open themselves to God, who is love. And all their it's not like they're hermits, yes, but people are constantly coming to them. And most of the sayings are their dialogue with people who come to them. And it's all about not judging, loving, forgiving, things that we consider Christian virtues, right? They modeled that. The caricatures that I had of monasticism as a low church Protestant just kind of got blown out of the water when I actually started visiting actual monasteries. I mean, the monks at St. Meinrad, they're not just sitting contemplating their navel 24 hours a day. They're working. The Benedictine auras, ora et labora, work and prayer. And so they work. They make, what do they make up there? They make coffins, they make urns. I buried my father in an urn made by the monks at St. Meinrad. They go into the prisons and do counseling with the prisoners. They do mass in the prisons. They're in the schools. So the caricature I had is, oh, they're just self-absorbed, those monks. You know, we Protestants, we're all about like, we got to go out and save the world. Maybe there are other ways that happens. You know, is it St. Francis who said, preach the gospel and if necessary, use words? Our lives should, and don't look at me. I feel like I screwed up royally. I'm trying to make up for it by saying, I want my students, I want you all to consider what it means to live a full Christian life, to have real life and life in abundance as Christ calls it.
Beautiful. Another question before we wrap up? Any questions you guys have?
My grandchildren are coming, so I got to get home.
Well, it's one of the things that I kept thinking about as you were talking about the monastic life is something that we've looked at pretty recently in the Book of Common Prayer, where the monastic rhythms, got included in morning prayer and noontime prayer and evening prayer and Compline as these great ways of stabilizing life.
Let me just say, when I go, as an oblate, I'm required, or I made a promise to go once a year for a spiritual retreat up there and to meet with my director. But I would describe it as kind of like letting myself fall into a slow-moving river. When I start praying the hours with the monks and having those psalms washing over me, my whole sense of time changes. It's beautiful. And people will say to me when I come back, oh, so now you're back in the real world. And I want to say, why do we think this is the real world? Why isn't St. Meinrad the real world? And I'm living in something that's a pale reflection of the real world. And you will never see how noisy our world is until you've spent some time in a Christian monastery. I mean, it's startling. But now I sound like an old curmudgeon.
Okay, well, we have been really blessed by your time here and your wisdom, and I feel like we've been invited into a deeper relationship with Christ and his church. So thank you so much for sharing with us these last 3.5 weeks. Thank you. Okay, Craig will hang around here for a few minutes. I'm sure he's glad to touch base with you as we go. We'll get the dishwasher fired up because apparently in the abbey, in the monastery, everybody does dishwork. Yeah, even the abbot. Yeah, so so I'll get started.